Hey everybody, this is Justin with Songbirds Music, Art, and Dance Center again, and today we are going to be talking about a little bit of how to make your music jazzy and spicy with some cool jazz harmonies. Why? Well, that is because next week, next Friday, is actually International Jazz Day. We're going to be doing a little bit of some fun for that, a couple cool events. But in the meantime, I wanted to teach you guys a little bit about how to apply jazz harmony to simple songs you may know in order to make them sound a bit cooler. Now, I do admit there is a kind of a high point of entry here. I am a classically trained musician. I studied all of that really dusty music theory stuff in college, and then I learned other styles. So if you are a pure jazz musician, this might be a little bit incorrect from how you learned it, but the principles behind it are still the same. So moving forward here, the number one trick to make any song immediately sound jazzy is to use what's called extended chords. Now, in previous videos, we talked about how the definition of a chord is a group of 3 or more notes that have unique individual pitches. So, for example, we're going to talk about the C major chord. A lot of you musicians know that C major is the 3 notes C, E, and G. That is C major, and it will always be forever and ever. Now we can extend that and we can put on some other cool notes that make it sound a bit spicier and a bit more unique. That would be the 7th note, and that is the 7th note of the C scale. So you probably already know the 7th note of the C scale is B. You can stack that on top of your C major chord to make either a B major 7, or a C major 7, which includes the note B natural, or you can have it be a C7, also called a dominant chord, which includes the note B flat, and that is using the 7th note of the scale, either natural or flat. You can apply that to any chord that you want. When you see jazz music, a lot of times you see these 7 chords everywhere, but you also see further extensions like 9s, 11s, and 13s. That's a little bit complicated. We're not really going to get into that today, but if you want to try on your own, all you do is that you take your 8-note C scale, and then you pretend that instead of restarting at 1 after you counted up the 8 notes, you continue going in numerical order 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, etc. So adding the 9th note would be a D above your high C, and then adding the 11th would be an F, the 13th would be an A, so on and so forth. So you get these really beautiful extensions. And if you know already that when you see a chord stacked in a triad form on sheet music, it kind of looks like a snowman, right? It's got 3 circle notes that are stacked beautifully on top of each other. The extensions will also always stack. So instead of having a snowman with a body, a middle, and a head, you kind of have like a centipede or a bigger alien snowman that has more body parts stacked on top in these extensions. Anyway, let's get back to the topic here. I've taken a very simple melody that most people know, that is Mary Had a Little Lamb, and here it is on the piano. I'm referencing everything on piano because I think most people have a little bit piano experience or access to a piano, but if you are a guitar player or you play another instrument like trombone, clarinet, whatever, feel free to practice and play on your instrument as well. I have written the sheet music here and you can watch me play it on the piano. Okay, pretty simple. Now, traditionally, this song is played with just 2 chords, the C major chord and the G7 chord. If you're into theory, you probably already know that that is just the 1, 5, 7, and 1 in the key of C major. Let's take a listen and a watch to see how that sounds. Excellent. Okay, now talking about our extensions, we can go and make this immediately sound more jazzy and more cool by applying our 7s to these chords. The G7 already exists in this song, so we don't need to change it, it's fine. We're going to apply a 7 to the C chord though. You can choose between the C major 7, which is a B natural, or the C7, which is a B flat. It doesn't matter. In this example, I picked a C7 chord, which is the B flat. Let's take a listen and see if you can pick out the one chord difference that makes it sound a bit jazzier. There we go. Okay, so automatically there's a very audible difference. It doesn't sound basic anymore. We've got some cool jazz tones, something's a little bit off and a little bit more out there, which is kind of fun and exciting. Now I've gone ahead and composed a different version of Mary Had a Little Lamb. The melody is the exact same as we've been using, but the chord harmony underneath is different. I've also written in the sheet music the chord symbols. You're going to see there's a lot of sevens, and there's a couple other things that we'll talk about in a second. But this is what it sounds and what it looks like. Awesome. Okay, now I'll be honest here, when I was writing this piece, I was following what I thought sounded good and what I thought my fingers and my ears liked. And that is a really good tip for any time you're writing any kind of music or recomposing like this. Music theory really helps us understand what we're experiencing in music, but it should never dictate what we do. Right, I let my ears follow what I thought sounded good, and then because I know a lot about music theory, I was able to name that and analyze why I liked it and why it sounded the way it did. So rules are totally meant to be broken in music. Learning music theory is very helpful, but don't let it confine you. Okay, so speaking of here, in this first part, the first chords are that C major 7, goes down to C7, both the sevens we learned about, and then F major, and then F minor. Now this is a really common technique here where you notice how the thumb or the high note in the left hand was moving down by half step or chromatically. This is a really common trick in a ton of popular music. The Beatles use this a lot in a lot of their songs, and it's a nice technique. So I happen just to stumble upon this. You can choose to do it on purpose, or maybe you'll stumble upon it too. But it's always a nice tried and true method to have your composition sound a little cooler. Let's listen again and see what else is going on in this composition. Our next measure after the chromatic descent uses a D7 and a G7. Now the D7 affects the G7 very strongly. That's something called a secondary dominant. We'll talk about that in the future, but just know that those guys have a very close relationship and they work together well. I threw that D7 in there because I wanted to keep the G7 just like the traditional song, and the D7 makes it kind of punch harder when we come back home to G. Let's listen to the second half and see what we did there. A lot of the second half is actually just repeated material from the beginning, but there are two spots that are tricky. The one chord that's really out there is that E flat major 7 chord. Now I included that because in the melody you're playing a G note. Within the E flat chord, the third of that chord is actually also the G note. That chord is spelled with E flat, G, and B flat. Now this is a pretty spacey, like this is a little more advanced, but this is called a common chord tone. So I'm able to use the fact that C major uses that G note and that it's also in the key of E flat major. Hitting that E flat chord sounds kind of surprising and shocking and whoa, where did we come from? But it's okay because that G note ties us back into the song we've been playing in the key of C. This is one of my favorite compositional techniques, and it works great for jazz music or things that are a little bit more extended and a little more out there. This last measure here is really bad for voice leading. If you have any kind of compositional experience, you've probably heard never have parallel fifths, which just means that you've got your chords stacked up and they move together in parallel. I tend to agree with that. I just didn't take the time to actually write this the correct way, but that is okay. It looks easier to understand this way. We have our second to last measure here play the D chord, and then it moves up to E, back down to D before ending on C. This is actually the same technique as we did with that E flat major 7 chord, because I'm using the melody notes to dictate what the chords in the left hand do. The melody notes are also doing D, E, D, and C, and so the left hand part is parallel motion moving with that. So that E major chord is a little bit spicy. That's something that doesn't quite belong in the key of C that we are using, but it works because the melody is allowing it to work the way it does. So it's highly related to what the right hand is doing. These are all some pretty advanced techniques, but I wanted to show you guys a little middle step of how you can take the idea of chord extensions and expand them into your writing your own music or making your music a little bit jazzier. Great, so I hope you learned something about this today. I really encourage you to take any instrument that you have and experiment with adding any kind of extension onto the chords you're already playing. For example, if you play guitar and you're really great at playing G chord, see if you can figure out how to play a G7 chord or maybe even a G9 chord and work that into your playing this week. Next week, we'll be doing a very special thing for International Jazz Day that uses a lot of these techniques. So practice hard this week, and I will see you again in a week for our International Jazz Day celebration. Thanks so much, and have an awesome day.